Oh, hi, everybody. My name is Matt Storrs, and welcome to Mattsplaining. On today's episode, I have an expert on who I'm very excited to speak with. Expert, please introduce yourself and tell us what you're an expert in.
Hi, I'm Bobby Hankinson. I'm a New York City-based comedian, writer, pop culture journalist, and I am an expert in the Real Housewives.
Fantastic. I have always been a big fan of the Real Housewives ever since Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and as an aficionado of the Real Housewives. This series and all of the different iterations, whether it be Atlanta, Kosovo, wherever you might think, these are all have been developed as a method of tax evasion. And these people, they traditionally, the husbands of these housewives are business moguls, lawyers, people that are making those high-end deals, and they have these wives that a lot of them very well-educated women. They work really hard to make it seem like they are not business moguls, tycoons, just they're catty and infighting with their neighbors over whether or not they're planting palm trees or bamboo in their yards or whatever it is. But really, these people are really big business magnates, and they realize that, like, well, I have this husband who's out and about doing all these things, bringing in this money, and this skill that I have, this information that I've gone through multiple MBAs or what have you, and multiple degrees, was being put to waste. So they looked into it and they're like, what we can do is we can finance some of this stuff that we want to do. All we got to do is create a whole business around it and then market it and sell it to people. And so then we can justify it on our taxes that, yeah, we went to Ibiza, we went to the Cayman Islands, we did all of these things, the places where you would hide money. And then people will get obsessed with us, and we can do whatever we want. And it can effectively hide some of the shadier business activities that our husbands are doing, as well as some of the shadier business deals that we're doing. And once this model caught on, I've mentioned Atlanta, I've mentioned Kosovo. There's been the Real Housewives of every community, and basically what they've taken is this kind of sense of, like, the rich ladies that were in your childhood town that, like, were kind of cliquish, maybe even like you're going back to like high school or middle school, those kind of girls that are kind of that focus, and then just transplanting that and making them representations for everybody to see. And they have a lot of extra additional hobbies that a lot of people don't realize. A lot of them do a lot of voiceover work in addition to the alcohol brands that they've sponsored and created. But the Bluey, famously the Australian cattle dog show, multiple of the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills or New York, Staten Island, not sure exactly which one, Jersey City, Real Housewives of Jersey City. They had a guest spot on there, along with, of course, the Real Housewives of Melbourne. And there was it's a very interesting Bluey episode where Bluey has to better understand how basically income inequality, if I'm going to be completely breaking it down, and like really just comes to accept that, like, you can be happy with your family despite not having everything that, like, those rich foreigners have. And I think that's a really classic episode that a lot of people appreciate, and they wouldn't be able to have that and have the cultural reticence had it not been for the Real Housewives becoming this mecca of pop culture that it is today. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the action figures. Some people call them dolls, but it's just so much more than that now. You have the 6-inch figures, the ones that it's not Barbie. We can't say that it's Barbie because it's definitely not a Mattel product. But you have a lot of these iconic garments that they've been wearing, the iconic scenes that have been turned into memes that you can dress your dolls in, you can dress
I
your action.
wish this was true. I wish this was true.
Okay. Yeah, and since we're there, how much of that would you say was accurate?
Oof. I give it probably like 2.5 of 5 bottles of rosé if I had to put it on a
Okay.
scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing I forgot to mention, but most of them do have some connection to a rosé company. You can track the popularity of rosé, and there's a direct correlation, and I would say causation, with the Real Housewives becoming popular and rosé having a renaissance.
You just boosted up your score to a 2.75 now.
Okay, fantastic. Yes, tell me about the Real Housewives.
Wow. First of all, you should know it was very hard for me to sit through that because I have truly stood up and walked out of dates for someone speaking ill of the Real Housewives. Not
Um,
before giving like a Meryl Streep and the Devil Wears Prada sort of like speech about it. So I was really biting my tongue through that whole bit. But honestly, you hit a lot of like overlaps of very real things. First of all, Real House of Beverly Hills being an entry point is common. I think you really seized on something there. 'Cause I do think that's where this franchise sort of took bloom. I want to take you back to a time. If you remember the early aughts, you want to say that maybe you did a little cart before the horse there with the tax evasion, that the tax
okay,
evasion was the cause and the celebration was sort of and all of the sort of glitz and glam was kind of the effect, but it's sort of the opposite. See,
okay,
we went back in, think back to like Desperate Housewives, the OC, and people think the OC was like a teen show, but remember, it was all about like Julie Cooper and all like the adult dynasty drama, Peter Gallagher's eyebrows and everything.
right.
So we went to the OC because we're like, we want to see the real of what this is, what are the real housewives of Orange County like? And we're like, what are their glitzy, glamorous, like soap opera-y lives like? And what we saw behind the gates was
Mhm.
grotesque. And what we saw were people that were like so broken and so like caught up in all of that and not finding any more happiness that we
Mhm.
could not look away.
I see.
And so what started as like let's sort of like celebrate the rich, let's sort of like look at them and they're sort of like Robin Leach best, and became this weird sort of carnival mirror of
Hmm.
America. And in a way, I equate it to pro wrestling, where like
Okay.
there's kayfabe, but I mean, like,
Right.
there is, we know this, we know these women are not on their own deciding to go to Ireland to find someone's like long lost genealogy or whatever for like a group trip of gals. Like, we know they're
Right.
not naturally doing that. We know that this is like an artificial setting, it is not reality. However, the choices they choose to portray in that reality is almost like the equivalent of like the dirt sheets. It's like,
Hmm.
why is it so important that she's looking like she got money or she has this job or this husband or things that are good? And when you're watching it on those levels, it is incredibly rich television.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, and I would imagine that like it kind of, and the more you watch, like the more if it informs itself, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, well that's the thing. It's become its entire sort of lore, its own
I
cinematic
see.
universe. There's spin-offs, there are conventions, there are comedy shows inspired by the Real Housewife. There are so many like cultural podcasts and discords and all kinds of things that have like spawned out of this, including, as you referenced, many legal battles. The
Hmm.
thing about Real Housewives is it's actually a genre piece, and each franchise sort of is like a different kind of genre. So like some of them are more true crime, some of them are horror, some of them are comedies, some of them are family dramas. And so they each kind of have like a unique flavor in that way. And a lot of the legal stuff has produced episodes of television that I think you can just put on completely out of context and just take in the beauty of it. One such is, of course, the famous table flipping finale of The Real Housewives of New Jersey season one. That is what I think transformed Real Housewives from like a jokey, like low, super bottom of the like bargain bin kind of like TLC doc reality show into like a pop culture phenomenon, which
Hmm.
opened the doors for Beverly Hills. So that was the moment. But I think you can watch the episodes and enjoy it. And then truly, I know the Real Housewives is a lot. It's a lot to take in. If you have to pick one, if you have to, it's easy. It's Salt Lake City. It is truly four perfect seasons of television. It is, you can just also watch the season two episode where one of the Real Housewives is arrested by the FBI live, like not live, but like fully on camera, completely caught in real time, like as they're ready to go on vacation. And then you're watching the women with sort of timestamps process this information and like read it on their cell phones. And it is such a compelling episode of television. And then
That's amazing.
there's like a Glass Onion-esque sort of finale to last season that culminates in this Bermuda Triangle dinner in this like windswept, like totally dramatic thunderstorm night that is a huge revelation that I don't even want to spoil it for anybody because literally you can just put on that episode and just watch it. They'll give you watch like the little like previously on and you can just enjoy it. I have turned so many people on to Housewives, but I think when folks dismiss it, and this is something I wanted to ask you about as well, actually before I give my opinion,
Okay.
because I thought it was interesting, not to bring gender into this, but that on a talk about Real Housewives, the first place you went was the husbands and what the husbands were up to and how this
Mhm.
was serving the husbands. And I'm curious in your knowledge, what you feel the feminist contemporary discourse around Real Housewives is.
I can't really say. I mean, my entry point really with the husbands was the husband that just most recently got was the lawyer that like kind of defrauded everybody. And
Sure,
so
Tom Girardi, of course. Yes.
yeah, yeah. So that was like my frame of reference and like from my understanding. So I would say that I think it would probably be kind of a mixed bag in terms of like how it portrays like female relationships and like the gossiping aspect of it versus like these women coming together at some points and showcasing true and genuine friendship. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm pretty in the dark into terms of how that discourse might be playing out.
And again, not that it's on me to take up this space.
No, totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Either, but I do find it interesting. Something I hear Real Housewives fans say a lot is that like it's one of the few places on television where you find women of this age like given this much like complexity and depth. These things, and I have to say, some of them like we also have this image of this younger woman who marries a rich old guy kind of idea. But then you kind of like get to know these women's stories and like what they've been through. Countess Luann, who again, obviously people know a lot as a punchline, like she survived an avalanche. She was like a model in Italy. Like she's had this, she was a nurse. She had this whole life that's
Mhm.
like just like they don't make them like that anymore. So it's like kind of
Totally.
also cool to like see this generation of women that were kind of scrappy in their own innovative and kind of like got by in their own way. It's kind of I kind of admire that about them.
Yeah, it seems from the little that I know, which I think we can all comfortably agree I know very little, is the history and the life experience that if you look at on the surface level, you're like, oh, okay, these are just rich women, they're catty, they're whatever. But then once you look at them and you recognize them as people and as the characters and the histories that they embody, it's like, oh, these are really complex and interesting people. And I could see how they kind of like would remind you of like family members or like extended family, aunts, uncles, whatever, and how you could kind of immediately kind of latch on to that.
Yeah, I like that. They do model actually sometimes like positive thing relationship building as well. Like you said, like they do make up, and then people say that like one of the things that sort of sinks Real Housewives when they sort of need to be freshened up is when they've reached like conflicts that can't be resolved because part of the catharsis of it is the conflict and the conflict resolution.
Right.
You get to see that, and sometimes it's very genuine, and sometimes it's in that pro wrestling kayfabe sort of like they're actually talking about their actual per episode contract salaries and behind camera stuff that they can, and so you kind of have to like read between the lines, and in a way that makes it almost like a more engaging viewing experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I would imagine that over the course of seasons, like new cast members get added, some people get removed. So I think that especially like coming in and making a big splash as quickly as possible, I think would be something a lot of them would try and do.
Yeah,
Is that
but the
accurate?
fan base is fickle, and that's the thing is you don't want to come off as too thirsty. But I mean, and
Right.
when they come in too hot, the fan base is like, whoa, 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 what are we doing here? That's what I mean. Like the decisions they make, the outfits they wear, the outfits they rent to kind of like give off a certain impression. And sometimes it's so clearly skewed. And that's what you're really seeing. It's like you see their relationships with their mothers, you see their relationships with their husbands, and all the sort of complications, the sacrifices, the all the sort of traumas that build up in all of us. And again, it's sort of like is this parable that consumerism and then riches sort of don't fill can't fill that void, that darkness in some ways. And I find that also very cathartic in a way.
Absolutely. And I feel like it shines a mirror on aspects of our society that you might not necessarily take a look at as closely so consistently.
Which you did sort of address in your opening statements, that it is sort of shines a light. I mean, maybe it wasn't in a Bluey episode, which, by the way, that was possible. And also the dolls, like Good Evening Sharks, like who do I have to talk to make this happen? Because Real Housewife dolls, like truly you're sitting on a bazillion-dollar idea. I
Oh,
would
thank
I'll take 10. What I mean, like
Absolutely. One for every person.
I would collect. I mean, I'm gonna actually be on eBay as soon as we finish this up to see if this already exists because
If
the
it
sheer,
doesn't, we
yeah.
will kickstart that right away.
Honestly, we would forget it. We forget this podcast, forget our comedy careers. Like, who needs it? We would just be living off the fat of the housewife toy industry that we would launch.
Absolutely. Bobby, this has been so insightful and so much fun. If people wanted to learn more about you or more about this topic, where would you recommend that they go?
Well, they can always follow me on Instagram at Bobby Hank, or they can come chat me up in person at Queendom the third Friday of every month at Pete's Candy Store in Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
Absolutely fantastic. Bobby, this has been so wonderful. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, Matt. This is my favorite thing to talk about. So literally anytime.
Wonderful. My name's Matt Storrs, and this has been Mattsplaining. Before we go today, I want to thank Ryan Lawson, my dear friend, for making the theme music for Mattsplaining. Ryan can be reached at beatblenderstudios@gmail.com or at Beat Blender Studios on Instagram and TikTok.